All right. Hello, everybody. And you made it. Last session of the day, session 4. We're stoked that you decided to stay with us all day. Got a great session for you. I'm Brian Wilson. I'm the DJ for this track, the API management and gateways track. And, don't stop asking the hard questions. That's what we're here for. Feel free to ask the questions in the chat. We will be planning to take them at the end of the session. So just so you know, but go ahead and as soon as you have that question, enter it. And so we've got Sid and Dennis here today. Take us through this session. And so no further ado, take it away, Sid.
Welcome, everyone. Glad you could join us. We're going to talk about API governance today, specifically around how do you automate the standards that matter in your API design and development as you provide APIs to your API consumers. So my name is Sid Bhatia. I lead our integration practice for Guild Systems. We are an IBM business partner, and I'm glad to share the stage with Dennis Matimo, who's also going to be co-presenting, and I'll be kicking it off. Dennis is the software architect for API Connect, and we'll be talking about several points today, including showing a demo for the things that we're discussing. So let's get to the next slide. So when you look at APIs in terms of why, the fact that you have APIs, that's great, that's part of your integration approach and strategy. But when it comes to APIs in an organization, as we talk to various customers of all sizes in various industries in various locations, we very often see that there is lack of consistency across their APIs in terms of how they're designed and written and deployed. This is either due to lack of API standards and policies for their organization, perhaps not being in place. They haven't even decided what standards they want to follow. Or in some cases, we see that standards are in place, they're written, they're there on some internal website for all the API developers and designers to follow. But then they're not enforced, they're not checked as people create APIs and deploy them into production. And by API standards, I mean standards such as, around security or design standards like naming conventions or how errors are handled and much more. And besides having standards in place, we see that there is a lack of review and oversight process where there is no API governance. Organizationally speaking, even there's no process or an operating model for API governance. And this results in API inconsistency and API sprawl. And that inconsistency can lead to security concerns that were not checked. And it is common to see several hundreds or even 1,000 plus in many cases APIs within an enterprise. So this API proliferation and inconsistency can also lead to API consumer dissatisfaction. After all, most likely you're building and providing APIs not for yourself to consume or use, but you're creating these APIs for another set of developers for them to use. So for them to consume your APIs in terms of their experience in browsing and understanding your API and then really using it. So let's go to the next slide. So why should you care about this whole topic of API governance? I went through some set of challenges that I shared before, but why does it matter? Because inconsistency makes it more difficult for your API consumers, your target audience for your APIs, harder to discover, slower to use, because after all, you're creating it for them to use. And when it comes to the API proliferation, you have you run into duplication or perhaps many similar APIs all over the enterprise because there was no process to check for similar APIs or perhaps even the same exact use case that a different project team in the organization tackled by creating another API. And then when you have these industry-wide, well understood standards around API design and API best practices, adopting them makes integration easier. And when it comes to security, enforcing and following and being compliant with best practices, industry standards around security, those things are really critical because it eliminates or reduces security risks for your organization, as well as keeping up with changes in the industry around vulnerabilities. Many organizations have their, besides industry standards and practices, many organizations have their own policies around how APIs must be compliant or how they must be designed. So making sure these are often industry specific, but making sure APIs that are created by API developers in one part of the organization are conformant to these organizationally defined internal policies that you have agreed on as a company. So that becomes a critical thing. So the net result of these points that I'm making is that you end up with APIs that are well designed, clean, well structured, and secure, that are not only easier for you, the API developer, and your organization to maintain and evolve and grow, but also for the consumers of these APIs. So let's go to the next slide. So we're talking about API governance, which refers to the comprehensive set of standards and policies and practices that direct how an organization or enterprise develops and uses and deploys their APIs. So it's all about consistency, following certain policies and standard formats, are to make sure APIs are secure. Let's go to the next slide. So let's take a look at an API. This seems to be a straightforward API that does something with retrieving information or retrieving product related information, as well as the ability to create or post some product related data. Seems straightforward, but how could this API specification or API document be checked against perhaps some best practices in the industry or your own company's API policies? Next slide. So it seems to be a version 3 of the Open API spec that seems to be compliant with, seems okay so far, seems to pass the Open API specification validation. Let's go to the next slide. But imagine you could run that through a tool that checks for these governance rules or rule sets that organizationally you have decided to follow. And, I see a scorecard, I see a list of errors. Let's take a closer look. So there are quite a few errors called out that one should be concerned about. Some of these seem to be, the info object must contain a description. Okay, I guess that was missing. Good catch. Good to know. And that's a rule that was there, decided upon as a company that must be, each API that you create must be compliant with. Let's look at another one. This is the versioning. Oh, okay, our company standard is that we must have a number in the version, but instead in this specification of the document we were looking at for that API, beta was called out as a valid version. Okay, good catch. Definitely me, the API developer, needs to take an action. Let's take a look at another one. So, oh, okay, so this is about the maximum or the size or maximum number of items in an array. Yes, I have an array in my open API, in my API specification, but the upper limit or the size of the array was not specified. And if you see in the middle column under rule, you see the name of the rule called out, the OWASP rule that is a security related concern that is called out. So if you're not familiar with OWASP, OWASP is an online community. It stands for Open Worldwide Application Security Project, and an online community that maintains ongoing, almost annually in many cases, an ongoing application security risk profile, and they actively monitor trends and vulnerabilities. Very useful for developers and security professionals. So this rule is part of the OWASP top 10 API security risks as of 2023. So let's go to the next slide. So as you saw, when you have a set of standards, you have a set of policies, and you have a set of best practices defined and agreed upon in an organization, it's still not good enough to just publish it and communicate it to the team. The next step is, organizationally speaking, process-wise, it needs to be picked up and followed and applied and enforced. And if I'm a developer, I need to be told, or another team needs to run a report, and I need to be told, go back and fix it, don't deploy it into production because it has these concerns. So that is what we're talking about, the comprehensive set of standards, policies, and best practices around how APIs are created, deployed, and made available for others to consume. Dennis?
Okay, so thanks, Sid. So one of the things I want to show here is how within API Connect, we've actually helped to make APIs compliant with all of the components that Sid was referring to earlier, in terms of security, governance, policies, and general compliance, both from an industry standard perspective and within your own corporation or corporate or organization entity as well. So what have we done? So we have codified a set of rules, or basically allowing the codification of rules within API Connect, and these are programmable guidelines and policies that can set how APIs should be defined, basically when they're being designed, developed, deployed, and managed. It's not just about the actual the time of actually the development, because as things move forward in time, rules evolve. For example, the OWASP rule set that Sid showed earlier was the 2023 versions. The earlier version was from 2019, so things evolve over time. So just like that, your own organization are going to introduce new rules or new policies as well. So we need to make sure that any APIs that have been deployed, that you can check as well. So it's not just about the development, it's also once they're being deployed. So what API Connect is doing is basically it's providing a tool set that covers a range of topics that you can check on within your API document. So really what we're talking about here is we are providing a rule set and rule management capability. So you can define your own rules and they can be grouped within a rule set, and then they can be used by the developer to validate their APIs as they're during the development timeframe. When the validation is complete, there's a scorecard report that's actually presented to the user that can be exported in a CSV format or a PDF format or report format, so that can be used at a later time. But we also have integration with CI/CD and DevOps products as well. So we have a fully integrated CLI component that allows you to actually run your validation. Even if you're not using API Connect purely for doing the development phase of your APIs, you can still exploit that capability externally as well. We have based this capability on top of the open source Spectral engine, which is a very well recognized industry capability as well. So we have integrated this API governance within the API Connect Manager user interface. As you can see here, for those of you familiar with it, you can see on the left-hand side, it's the standard user interface. But what we've done is we've added a tile, basically a shield capability, or basically a shield icon. When you click on that, you then get into your rules, you're basically your governance area, where you can then manage your rule sets. When you're editing your APIs, you can actually validate those APIs from the existing API designer within API Connect. You can run or validate your APIs against those rule sets. As you can see on the right-hand side, you can get your report card. And as I said, you can download and export as well. So it's fully integrated. From the governance perspective itself, within the shield icon, you can have your capability to create your rule sets, very similar to the way that you actually deal with or develop your APIs. You can view them in a clean way, or you can actually go and look at the actual raw detail as well if you desire. So what makes up a rule? So there's a number of elements to a rule. So the first part is we need to have a unique name within a rule set. So every rule, it has to be unique, otherwise, so we can actually trace it within the within the product. We have to provide a severity, so the severity of errors, warnings, info, etc. So there's a few of those. We'll go through those when we go through the demo. We can also put basically an input on what type of document the rule is particularly valid for. For example, it can be the OpenAPI specification 2 or 3 or 3.1, etc. So you can write a rule that you can have within your rule set. You can well, this rule will apply to OpenAPI spec 2, but then you can have an analogous rule that will work for only for OpenAPI spec 3 within the same rule set, but those rules will only be executed against the relevant OpenAPI spec version that you have. We have a given, and what this is basically a JSON expression of where within the document we want to look. And for example, one of the items that Sid had mentioned earlier was the actual version part. And you can see here that on number 4, we're looking within the info block of your API, and we're looking for a property called version. And then that's actually narrowing it right down to exactly what you want to look for. But you can just set $, and it can scan the entire document. So you can be very, very specific or very broad in what you want to check on. And then the final part is the actual the then component. So basically it's a spectral function with options that basically tells you what you want to do on the given element that you specified in number 4. So for example, here we're looking for a pattern, and that's a core spectral function. And the options are a regex basically format of what it is you want to look for. And as you can see there, you're looking for a version format. It's got a number, a period, northern number, etc. So that'll just basically tell you that you want a particular type of format within version. So it's a very extensive capability that you have. So I've been talking here about how you create rules, etc. But one of the things here is and actually how you can use them as a developer. But once you've actually deployed these within a catalog or a space within a catalog, what you'd like to do is, well, I want to see what's actually running out in my landscape, in my API landscape, what the APIs that I've already deployed. So we have a capability within the governance feature is that you can navigate to your catalog. You go down to the governance tab on the right-hand side at the bottom there, I say at the top there, and you can execute a scan. And what this does is it basically prompts you for, well, what rule sets do you want to actually be scanned, those APIs within the catalog to be scanned against, and then you kick that off, you start it, and what it'll do is it'll look at each individual API within the catalog, and it will actually scan those. Now, as you can imagine, there could be hundreds or even thousands of APIs there. So it doesn't happen instantaneously, as you'd imagine. So what happens is this asynchronous process goes off and will actually take every API, scan it, and then it'll collate the results from every single API, and then it'll report it back to you here in a list. And you can rerun reports and things like that as well. And it'll give you a full summary, etc. But we're going to go through that in the demo. So here's the actual report output, very similar to what you'd get in the actual within the developer phase. The only difference is that you can see the actual API. You can look at or basically drill down into individual APIs as well. So these are just screenshots of what's there. So let's take a quick look at API Connect governance. Oops. So here's one of my developer. Basically, this is API Connect 10.8.2, which was released last Friday. And we can step into the phase here. Let me just get my sequence here. So we have some APIs that we're working on at the moment. And I'm working on an API for Acme Airlines. And as we go through the development, I can see here that we have the API in place, very similar to what Sid had showed earlier. It's an OpenAPI spec version 3. It's got a title, version, etc. So we've got some of the things that Sid was actually referring to earlier. But what I want to do is I want to validate it against my particular rule sets. So one of the things here is when you actually get through this, you get prompted with all of the rule sets that have been published within the product. So I'll just open up this so you can see them all. So I've got a custom one here, a test one. We'll leave that there for the moment. We'll get into that in a little while. But you can see here that we have OpenAPI specifications. So we've got the version 2.0. This is what comes from Spectral, but this is actually the 2023 versions of OpenAPI rules. They're OWASP rules. We also have a 1.4.3 version, and that's the 2019 version. So you can see we have multiple different versions of rules because obviously as things move on, as things evolve, you can have new versions of them in the same way that you can have APIs. But what we can reduce that then to show only the latest ones. So we include out of the box the Spectral rules, the OpenAPI specification rules as well. You can see here that do type checking, etc. on it. And we also then have the OWASP rules, but we've also got some examples that we as a group are providing as well, so that you can look at, you can take examples of, and you can extend as well if you wish. So you can select multiple rule sets if you desire, or you can select an individual rule set. So in this, for this example, we're going to do something similar to what Sid had shown earlier. We're just going to go against the OpenAPI OWASP security rules. And here we see all of the actual rules that are actually in this. And just to format it here, you can see here that Sid had mentioned that there are top 10 API areas that should be addressed from a security perspective. We have rules for the first 9. Number 10 is actually for a running system that we obviously don't see from API Connect. But we have API 1, 2, 3, etc. And you can see all of the individual rules here and etc. And you can decide I want to only run on a couple of rules, or I want to do all of the rules. And in this particular part, we're going to just do all of the rules. And just to, as we went forward, one of the things that Sid had pointed out was the array limit. And this was the actual finding with max items in it. So that's the actual rule that was actually that the finding had been presented on. So when we click validate, the OpenAPI specification is passed across to Spectral. It runs its test on it, and then the report comes back. So we have 131 findings within this. Almost 60% of them are warnings, but there are nearly 43%, 56 errors in that we should really address. So what we can do is within the actual UI, we can actually filter on all the errors. I can navigate down here and I can actually see all of the errors that are actually in the document. If we had multiple rule sets, you can actually filter on those rule sets, or I can actually type in basically search criteria here as well, so I can reduce the size of the actual report. If there was a lot of things you want to work on, you can download these as a CSV format, and you can actually look at them offline if you wish. So let's look at some of the actual findings here. So we see a number of operations aren't protected by any security schema. Obviously, that's very important. We actually also have some arrays that do not have boundary settings on them. And also, you can see items here that you have basically, that the format of the integers isn't actually specified properly, etc. There's also items here, for example, rate limiting responses. So you can see here that all 200 or 400 response types should define a rate limiting header. It doesn't happen in this. It's not happening in this API. So how would we actually resolve these things? So what you can do here is you can see the findings up here, you can select on them, and you can navigate your way to the individual ones. So in the interest of time, what I have here is we're going to actually fix all of those 56 errors right now. So we're going to create a new version of the API. I'm going to call it version 1.6.0 because the other one was 1.5. It's going to create that. The original 1.5 is actually here. I'm going to go over to the source, but what I'm going to do here is, in the interest of time, I've actually got a version. Basically, I've got, hang on a second, select all of these. I actually have an API, the fixes here, Control A. So I've got a new version with these fixes in them. So you can see here, it's version 1.6. It's still the same Open API specification, but it's got some of the actual findings resolved. So for example, I've defined security policies. I also have put in a rate limiting controls on it, and I've also added in some of the resource constraints as well. These are the typical findings that you have. So let's validate this against the same rule set that we did before and see whether we've actually had a positive impact on things here. We leave all of the rules in place again, and we can see here all of our errors are actually resolved, and quite a number of the warnings have been resolved as well. So we can see there that we've actually made some good changes to this API. So that basically shows you roughly how a developer would actually interact with this. But that's actually using rule sets that actually have been provided to the developer. So in terms of an organization, how is it that I would actually like to interact with my rule sets? So as Sid had mentioned, there may be rule sets that are actually need to be provided from a corporate level that may need to go to multiple departments. So what we provide, what IBM provides, is the concept of the global rule sets and actually organizational specific rule sets. Now I'm going to show you how an organization can create their own ones, but it's the exact same process. If you want to do this from the configuration, from the Cloud Manager UI, you can create a rule set and you can pass that down to all of your PORGs, your provider organizations as well, so all of your tenants. So what we're going to do here is we're going to create, actually just to quickly show you, this is the OWASP rule set that we get that we've included, and you can see here these are all the 32 rule sets that are there, rules that are there. And let's just look at, say, an integer limit one here. You can see here there's the title, as I said, a description, what error comes up if there's a finding, and actually what the actual severity type is, what the value is, and it's looking at here, it's looking for anything that's got a type of integer. And then what we do is the then is looking for a field called minimum to make sure it's defined, and a field called maximum to make sure it's defined. So as I said, it's the codification of these rules is the key thing. So these are out of the box rules, but what happens if I want to create my own version of a rule? So you've got the ability, you can import ones. So if you've got ones already in your organization or in your company, you can import those, or you can create them from scratch. So what we can do here is I've got a sample one that we're going to just start building up here, and we're just going to basically call this so my Acme Air rule set. I'm going to basically navigate here into, I'm going to create one rule. And what we're going to do here is, so one of the things we always want to do within Acme Air is we always want to make sure we have Acme in the title. So let's just give it a decent description. So Open API documents must start with ACME. All the titles must have ACME in them. I'm not going to put a message in here. I could put in one here, but if I don't put in one, what happens if there's a finding is whatever's in the description is presented in the finding. But so in this case, I'm just going to leave it as is. I'm not going to make it an error. I'm going to make it a warning. But you can see here that there are warning, info, hint, or I can set it to off, which means that this rule will never be triggered if you want to do that at some point. This is just a spectral thing. So we're just going to set it to warning. So what are we going to check on? So in this particular case, what field within the API do we need to check on? And it's going to be the info block and on title. So, but what is the function that we actually want to run? So the function that we want to run here is actually is we want to check to see at the beginning of anything that's in title. So what'll happen is Spectral will run through, or the governance feature will run through the API, look for the title field within the info block, and it'll actually run this function called pattern. And it'll check to see it's a regex at the very start. Does it have ACME at the start? To make sure it matches. And if it does, then there's no finding. But if it doesn't do, there will be a finding. So here we have the rule set and the rule has been created. You can see here, this is the general part. And if you look at the rules here, you can select on the actual individual rule, and you can see we've got all our basically fields in place. So I'm now going through my development, but I need to test it because there's no point in releasing this into my developers if I've made a coding error. So I can validate this, and what it does is it basically goes off and actually will look at your actually various APIs that it's got access to. So I've got some sample ones here, Gmail and Salesforce. They're not real, but you can see what it is. So I can see here, I know my Acme Airlines does have that title in it, but I know Gmail doesn't have Acme in it. So let's just validate this. And what we would hope to find is that the Acme API does not show find the error because it's already here, but we know the Gmail wouldn't have that, so it does flag it. So now I know that my rule is actually good. So I can actually then go off and actually I can actually go and actually could release that if I wanted to. So that's how you would quickly make a very simple one. So we've spoken about creating it or importing ones, but what happens if I want to take something that already exists within my global rule set and I want to extend it? So what you can do is you can take that, and I'm going to view this one here. So this is one of the IBM ones we provide, and it's basically checking the inflow block to make sure you've got contact description, terms of service, and semper as well. So what we want to do here is I want to actually make my own version of this. So I can save it as a new rule set. I can give it a demo rule set. I can give it a version number and things like that. I can save that, and you can see here, we go back over to here. I can see now, not only has it moved from here, it's not moved, but we made a duplicate copy of it here, and it's called demo rule set. So I can come along here and I can actually basically run this, etc., against my APIs. So one of the things that we said I want to just show you here is we've got a status here. So I've mentioned here we've got a life cycle on this. So when we're working in a draft format, when we're working on developing the rule sets, it's in draft status, and I can validate from within the actual editing experience here. But if I want to then share this out with people within my organization to use, I need to publish it. So when I click publish, it is now made available, and it's made available then for developers to use. So let's just do a quick check on that. We'll go back to my APIs. I can go back into my latest API here, and actually I can come along here and I can actually, as before, run with rule sets. I can go and select on my demo rule set, click next, and I can see these are all my rules. So let's just do a quick check here. I want to see, do we have the contact field in my API? And I can come along here and say, oh, I don't have that. So what can I do? So I can then go off and I can actually fix that in my API definition, and I can basically put admin at acmeair.com. So that's the actual email address that would be set. I can save that. I can then revalidate it, go through it again, I can do the contact, and I say, great, it's all my, no findings at all, my API is good. That's great. So that's fine. I've gone off, I've created my own ones, I've extended it. But what if I come along in here and I want to actually add in another item to this? So if I'm actually within this and I said, ooh, I've already published this, but I need to add in another rule to this. I can't add it because it's been published. So I can actually create a new version of it. So if I go demo rule set, but it says, oh, it already exists. Well, I'm just going to give it a new version here. So 1.1. So I can save that. There's a new version of it. I can see that there's the older version and the new version. If I go to the older version, it's published. Go to the new version, it's still in draft. And I can add in I can actually edit these rules. I can actually delete rules out of it, or I can add new rules in. So the rule I'm going to add in here is, we've been talking about OpenAPI specific specifications and things like that. So let's look at something extended a little bit in terms of looking at gateway policies or something like that. So I want to look at IBM specific items in terms of my gateways. And I want to look to see, I want to create a rule that actually will look at some of the gateway policy information or gateway extensions. So I want to see if target URL exists in this. And basically I can say my description here is, I have it over here on the left-hand side here, so just make it easier for typing. I want to make sure that the target URL to be used by the gateway is always present. So I create this, it creates the stub of the rule. So let's see what we want to do with this. So I want to make it an error, so I want to leave it as error. What is it I want to look at? So in my given field, I want to look here, and in the XIBM configuration portion of your document, and I want to see, does the actual target URL actually exist within the document? So in this case, we're looking at a function called truthy, and that'll just check to see, does it actually exist? And what we're looking here is, underneath XIBM configuration, is there a property called target URL? So let's actually just save that, and let's publish it again. Just checking on time-wise. So we've got a few minutes left still. So I've published this. I now go back here and I can see here we've got my new version published 1.1. I go back to my API and I can just check to see, do we have that capability within my API or that element? And what we're going to do here is we're only showing the latest rules. So if you select on this, you can see here that we've got the two versions. I'm going to choose the new one. I'm going to click next on that. And then you can see here we've got the gateway extension, the gateway rule. We just do a quick check on that one. And we say we need to enforce, and you've got a finding there. So we click done. And again, we come back to here. I can actually go to my OpenAPI, and I can go down to the very bottom here. We've got our assembly, our XIBM configuration underneath assembly, and I can actually add in the actual part that I actually need for this. But actually, what I'm going to do here is I'm going to just make it simple for myself. I'm just going to go in here to gateway. I'm just going to add it in here, and I'm just going to make a property here. Property, and we're going to just call it target URL. URL, and basically the value is going to be so we can just add that in, add that property, and we can save it, and then I can validate my rule again, and actually with the same rule set and the same rule. Now it does cache what you've done before to make it easier when you're going through bits and pieces. And hopefully, yes, we have that item is now added in. So that just shows you that it's not just OpenAPI specific specification stuff. We can look at custom extensions and the custom properties and things like that. So I did mention that this is not just about the developer experience. So we go back into the governance component, and we can see here there's a way that you can run catalog or space validation. So I can, from here, I can actually select a catalog or a space. So I can go through here, I can specify which catalog or space that I want to do. I can do a scan on. So I've got one a catalog here that's got 2 spaces in it, and I know that the Titan one has a couple of APIs in it, and I'm going to run a scan on this. So what is it I want to actually scan on? So you can see here that I've got multiple APIs and things like that, and I'm just showing the latest versions actually. So as before, it's very similar to the developer experience. I can select which ones I want to actually run on. And then just for the sake of completeness, I'm just going to just do the OWASP rule set again. So the 2 APIs are the 2 sample ones, the Salesforce one and the Gmail one. We're going to check to see exactly the same way as before. The 32 rules are presented for me to select or deselect, but I'm going to let them all run through. I can click next, and then I'm going to give it a title. I can just give it the default one, or I can just do a demo 1. So I can start the scan at this point here, and then what happens is basically the scan operation is kicked off. What happens is it gets queued for actually usage. And one of the things is the spectral or the actual scanning process is actually very resource intensive. So what we do is we actually we distributed the workload across the multiple pods that API governance or the governance service actually works across, and we actually stage it. We only do maybe 5 in parallel on each pod to make sure that you're not overloading the system. So what happens is then that the system goes off asynchronously. It'll scan each API document. It'll then report back to say, well, I'm 20% complete, 50% complete, etc. to the system, and then it'll be marked here as being complete. So you can come back here afterwards, and you can actually see that it's actually run through. And you can see here, very similar to what I showed in the developer experience, you get the same overall dashboard. There's a couple of notable differences. You can see here that you've got the date of the scan. Now, if you had multiple scans, which you can actually rerun a scan. So I could rerun a scan at a later time. We'll talk about some of the efficiencies we've added in there. We detail what rule sets have been applied and if there are any particular rules that were disabled. And we put this in because it's useful when if you want to generate a report, you can actually see exactly what was actually in the actual report, what caused the reports to be generated. We can again look at the total number of errors. We can add in the warnings and things like that very quickly. And we've got very similar basic search criteria. So we can look at all errors, we can look at individual rule sets if there were multiple ones, and we can look at individual APIs. So I can select on my Gmail API and I can see here that it's all for the Gmail ones. If I want to go to another one, I can look at Salesforce, very similar sort of findings that you have in place. So as I said, we always have the capability that we can export this in comma separated value format, or we can actually do a PDF here as well. So it'll generate a PDF view of what you see on your screen, and that can be taken and distributed into your execs, etc. I did mention that you can rerun a scan. Now, the interesting thing about a scan rerun, if you've got a catalog that's got a large number of APIs, and it can take a significant amount of time to actually generate the report. What you don't want to do is constantly rerun an API that hasn't changed, because you're not changing the criteria of the scan. You're potentially changing the landscape that you're actually going to be scanning. So what we do is we keep track of the feature keeps track of the elements that have been the collection of APIs that were run in this scan. Any new or modified APIs are scanned. Any APIs that are unchanged there's no point in scanning them again. So it's very, very efficient. So if I click rerun on this, immediately you're going to see this just refresh, bang. We now have 2 scans. In reality, we haven't changed any of the APIs. It just creates another report, which effectively identical. But you can see here now, you can scan through here. You can see that the difference in the actual the times that it was actually run on. So this one is 3 minutes after the first one. I can come along here and actually rename a scan, or I can actually delete items out of it. So I can delete individual reports and things like that. You can never delete the very last one. That's the thing here. Or I can delete the scan with all the different parts. So that pretty much covers all of the actual items that I wanted to share from a demo perspective, and just to introduce API governance within API Connect for you. So I'm going to hand back to Sid.
Yeah, thanks, Dennis. Very lively, useful demo. There are a few questions that have come in through the chat, and I'll go through them one by one. The first easy one is, when did this governance feature get added to API Connect in terms of time, or like, which year and which version number?
So it was originally added into a CD release, the 106, sorry, 10.06 release. I think that was just over a year ago, and I was at the start of actually, it was probably about 18 months ago, actually. So it was in actually the late 2023. It's been added into 10.08 LTS release. So 10.0.8.2 got released last Friday, at the end of last week. So it's available within that for you to actually consume and use.
Okay, thank you. The other question was, is there a challenge in running rules against legacy APIs that have been discovered? Do you need to create new rules for those older APIs?
So in terms of I'll question back. So the discovered APIs, these are ones that come in for the API discoverance component, is it?
I assume yes. So these are
okay.
APIs. So, the reference to legacy APIs, that means
okay.
they've been, existing APIs that somehow the organization has discovered. They want to put it under management control.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, so what you can do is when you actually discover an API, you can actually then move it, take that API and then pull it in under as a draft API, and then you can actually exactly the same process as I ran through earlier. You can go through that.
Okay. The other question was, I would like to see if the rescan will actually detect a fix in an API.
Yes, it absolutely can. So what happens is, as I mentioned, when you click rescan, it will actually look at the previous scan, and it will actually see that the API has changed, and it'll actually scan the new version of that API. And then that way, then you can see that the finding will be removed. So it won't show you that it's actually that we fixed an error, but what you can do is you can actually compare, you can export the CSVs for both of the previous one and the other one. You can do it externally. It has been talked about an ability that we can actually do a delta between different reports and actually show those. It's something that we need to take to our product management to actually decide whether that's a feature we want to move forward with. But we have the data. Absolutely, it could be something that could be added in. If people wanted, would like that, then basically start knocking on the door of product management.
Yep. Yeah, I think that's exactly the question, where if something is fixed, then the error message doesn't show up upon a rescan. But the question is, does it point out that it's fixed? So
yeah.
Okay, understood. Another one is, assuming the rule versions be maintained and pulled from code repositories, can the rules be auto-run and restrict API stage propagation?
So yeah, I think what it's looking at, I think that what they're referring to is there a way that we can, prior to the publish of an API, or basically a product containing APIs, can we actually enforce the validation of that? So that is a feature that is actually in train at the moment. I can't give a release date for it, but it's definitely something that we're actively looking at. So that when prior to publishing of an API or a product containing APIs, that validation would have to be set up for that. But that's something that is being worked upon, but I can't give you a time frame of when it's actually going to be released.
Okay. The next question was about the persistence and longevity of the scan history and the results itself. The question is, I would like to see whether the scan history remains after logout and login. In our environment, previous scans are lost when you log out.
Okay, well, let's log out. Okay, so let me just show you. I've got 2 scans here. I have 1 scan here. So let me log out. And I can log back in.
Right. The question is, what is the expected behavior?
The expected behavior is it'll be
there.
maintained. It'll be maintained. There you go.
Okay. All right. So this question was from Mark. You saw, tried to recreate it, didn't see it. Probably worth reporting it through the support process.
Absolutely, yeah. If there's something there, but remember this is 10.082, so
yeah,
it should
that's right.
It should be there. One thing just to be wary of, if you've got basically different organizations. So if I change my organizations, we'll see here to a different organization. I can see here I don't see that scan result because it was run for a different organization and there's different permissions, etc.
Yep, that's a good point. Organization specific. Another follow-up question is, I want to know that you can create a scan configuration which will persist across logins and retain scan history for that configuration. Without this capability, I find this capability or this governance capability unusable. So I think we're talking about the persistence across logins. And to your point, you're saying it's supposed to be there. You showed that it's there, it's persisted, it's retained. But if you switch orgs, then it won't.
Naturally, but you can't see it because of permissions. Just to tell you that this is backed by the Postgres database, so the scans and scan results are actually maintained there.
Right. Please demonstrate. I think the request is for you to demo it now since we have a few minutes. Please demonstrate that a fix is actually recognized. That is, the error count should be reduced based on the fix. I think you demonstrated that already when you addressed fix something and then the errors went away or got reduced.
Well, okay, so let's look at one of these ones. So did I do? Yeah, I did one with the contact, and I did one with right. Yeah, I've done a few of those. Yeah, I think I have done that. Right. I've already done that. I can do it again.
Yeah. So no, I think you pointed it out. I mean, that was part of your demo to begin with, right? It flagged issues. You addressed an issue, then you rescanned it, and those issues did not get flagged.
Yeah.
This was for a catalog-based scan.
Yep. Oh, for a catalog-based scan. So, I haven't got that set up. So that for that I need to republish, and that we've only got a few minutes, so I don't have time for that. Unfortunately, I haven't got that set up. But it's the same process. So if I don't have any APIs that I could fix. Oh, okay. So actually, maybe I can do one of those. So let's go to back to say Gmail. And so we know that Gmail doesn't have a contact, okay? So let's just run a scan just purely for next Titan. Was that the last question, just by the way?
Yes.
Okay, so let's just do this very quickly. I'll go to the IBM demo one here. So we just look at the contact, and we just see this. So we can run a scan, and we basically contact. So we just run this. So it's queuing and it's complete. So it's 2 errors. Neither Salesforce or Gmail have that. So let's
just to clarify, Dennis, we're talking about not a specific API scan, but a catalog scan.
This is a catalog scan because it's more than one single API. This was done on a particular. Yeah, this is done on a particular. Yeah, it's on a particular. It's the prod Titan. Yeah, here you go. Catalog space. There you go.
Yes.
Yeah. Sorry, I got myself confused. Okay, so let's go back and fix that with here. Go back into Gmail. I can then put in this, and I can put in it's basically admin at google.com, just as an example. I'll save the API. hopefully my demo environment will actually allow me to publish it. And I can existing product. I go to my Gmail one here. Next, I'm going to go to Prod Titan. Fingers crossed this actually works. It says it's being published.
That's the magic of a live demo.
Yeah, this is fun. Yeah, published in progress. Do not fail me now. So let's just refresh that. Hey, okay. So now this is now, did I earn my money this week? So I go back into my demo. Apologies, it wasn't demo one. It was the contact one. We've got two. I run a rescan, and it's still running at the moment because it's only got one scan. We now have two scans. We now click the second one, and it didn't work. Oh Lord, contact email.
I think yeah. So that explains why the question came up in the chat. Perhaps they ran into this issue. So
yeah, maybe, that should be that. Okay, that absolutely should have worked because it's gone up. So yep, I'll certainly take a note of that and put it back. That's definitely should have checked it. Yeah.
Right.
Oh, hang on. Here we go.
What? You didn't fix it.
I didn't put it in the right place. I didn't put it in the email part.
Okay.
So maybe I could be wrong, but anyway, I think we're running out of time anyway. So I'll just have that running in the background anyway. So I suspect that there may be something there. So I'll certainly take a note of that, and but definitely raise that through your support channels if that's actually genuinely happening.
Right. Well, we still have 4 minutes, Dennis.
Okay, we still have 4. You said you really do like me putting me under pressure. Do we want to go through anything else?
Let's see. So Brian has reminded everybody through the chat where, to keep the conversations going, such as this one that we're having live, interactive, exciting conversations about capabilities and challenges. So keep it going through the Tech Exchange community, and the link is in the chat. And is your scan running?
It's completed and it's the same. So there's
right
something there I will look at. So thank you
thanks for pointing it out.
Yeah. Live demos, I love them.
Yes.
All right, fabulous guys, and thank you, Mark, for helping find that. And so certainly, as Dennis said, be looked at. So great day of discussion and learning. Again, wrapping up the 4th session, but we're not done. We've got office hours, which is happening in 8 minutes from now. Once we officially wrap this, and we'll kick that off at 2:30. Please respond to the survey that you're going to get here momentarily. It will appear again in the bottom left corner of your screen. We want that feedback, right? So we can again continue to improve what sessions we're delivering to you and improve TechCon in general. So again, within a couple minutes here, I'll be opening up the session for office hours, and meet me there if you have time. Again, talk live with our presenters from throughout the day in the API management and gateways track. So otherwise, we hope to see you bright and early tomorrow morning, 9 a.m. for day 2 of TechCon. Thanks everyone for attending.